Hello, I'm Colin Kelly, and in this new episode of the Frobel Trust podcast, I'll be exploring outdoor play and young children's connections with nature. Frobel was a pioneering educator who invented kindergarten. The word kindergarten actually means garden for children. Frobel's vision was for a garden which offered space for young children's play and exploration, with educators making time for children to be in contact with nature. But how can schools and early years settings support outdoor play for young children now? What if your setting's in the middle of the city, or has very limited access to outdoor space? What does a Frobelian garden look like? And what if your staff or the children at your setting are reluctant to spend time outside? Well, I'll be exploring all these issues and more with my guest speakers. Beverley Dickinson, the nursery manager at Tiddler's Wraparound in Caerphilly, Wales. Holli Williams, a Frobel Trust trustee and head of schools for a group of nurseries in South London. We have Janice Marriott, head of Tough Kid Nursery in Golders Green in North London. And Felicity Thomas, a Frobel Trust travelling tutor and former head of Earlham Nursery School in Norwich. Well, you can find out all about my guests by reading the podcast description. But let's just start with Felicity Thomas. What did Frobel have to say about the outdoors?
Well, Frobel believed that you could learn everything in the outdoors and in nature, because his main principle is around unity and connectivity. And he was absolutely passionate about children being connected to their home, which is their planet, their universe, and that everything that we need to learn in life can be learnt through nature and through being in nature and understanding and having a connection and seeing ourselves. I think David Attenborough said this in one of his programs. He said about how we are, as human beings, a part of nature. But unfortunately, in this time, this age that we're living in now, we are see ourselves as a part. We're outside nature now, and we should be absolutely in the centre of it. And that's what Frobel believed.
So Holli, if we look at, you obviously a group of nurseries in South London under your remit, it seems as if Frobel is saying that this outdoor aspect, it's not a nice to have, but it's absolutely fundamental. Can you just tell me a little bit then about how you've kind of taken that and set things up for your group of nurseries?
Yeah, of course. So our nursery schools, we're in London, so we don't have huge outdoor spaces. So we have to think very carefully about how we set them up to meet the needs of the children that we have within the nursery. And we have children from very young babies from 9 months all the way up to till they go to school. So we really need to think about what kind of things we have accessible for the children, but also what's available in our local community that we can access, our parks, our commons, the playgrounds, and how can we access them in a way that would be really beneficial for the children. So obviously there's a lot of emphasis on the educators who are really observing the children to think about what is it that I can add to the gardens, what is it that I can add to these experiences that are going to keep them engaged with nature. Is it the stories that we talk to the children about, but also the actual real life first-hand experiences. So make sure that they can go to the commons. We can go out in all weathers, we can go out in the rain, we can jump in the puddles, and really notice on how that makes us feel as educators, but also the impact that has on the children as well.
And Janice, Holli gave us a few examples of what the outdoors might mean. Is it in Frobel's teachings? Is there any sort of hierarchy to the outdoors? Is it better to grub around in soil than to walk to a railway station, or is it the kind of rugged outdoors, or could it be a neat and tidy outdoor space, or is it just whatever you can get to?
Well, our nursery is also in London, and we have very little space. So again, we've had to think very carefully about what we do with our space. With us, the children have lots of different elements that they can use. So we have our growing patch, which they can grow their vegetables, and then they can pick their vegetables and use them for soups or for salads. We also have water features where the children can have big movements to be able to use big pumps, to be able to pump the water, and that water flows into sand. So again, it's that nature of the water and the sand ebbing and flowing together. We have pulley systems for the children as well that they can use. Again, the idea that, a child that can look after something in nature can start to look after themselves and to the people around them. So we have fish in the garden, and we find that for our very little children, that feeding those fish and looking after them every single day helps support them in looking after the other children around them.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and we'll explore more about that as we go along. And Beverley, your early years setting in Caerphilly, you've got quite a large garden space. So tell me a little bit, Beverley, about what's in that space, and what would you do with that on a typical day?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate. We've got a huge front garden and a back garden, and I think one of the things about Frobel, it was relationships were really important. Part of his teachings with the community, the children's families, their relationship with themselves and with others. So we've kind of invited families in to help us to create this space for children. So we've got a huge growing garden, and then we have a large expansive space where children, can just totally autonomously do whatever they wish to do. And then in our rear garden, we created a wildflower space and just a much wilder space where children can start to, understand biodiversity and how we share this universe together.
I mean, I'm just thinking of my own experience of children in nurseries, and I know some that are in for maybe 8 or maybe 10 hours a day. So, Beverley, in your nursery, if a child was in for that length of time, what proportion of the time might they spend outside?
About 90%. I mean, we're out all winds and weathers all day. The doors are open all day. So, again, Frobelian freedom with guidance. There are obviously always educators around. But when those doors open, it's very, very rarely you'll get children staying indoors. They'd rather be outdoors. So we've always got wet weather clothing and wellies that we provide for the children. We have clear umbrellas so they can go out and do raindrop racing or, just to still be part of their surroundings. But yeah, I'd say the majority of the time our children are outdoors.
You've been talking about all weathers. Now, there's a big difference, Felicity, between, being out in drizzle and a torrential downpour. So is it practical, to be out even when it's as bad as that?
Yes, absolutely. What a wonderful sensation. If you've got the right clothes on, I think it's the Swedes that say there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. And that's absolutely true. And children love being out in torrential rain. The sound is just amazing. And then if you take things out that magnify the sound, like take a cymbal out and put a cymbal on your head in torrential rain, you've never heard anything like it. It's just amazing. But it's about making those connections, and children experience everything through their senses. So the more sensory experiences that you can give children, and the outdoors is so rich in sensory experiences. Indoors, you're limited. And one of the senses, or two senses that I think you're really limited with indoors, is the sense of sight and your sense of smell. Now, outdoors, they are in abundance.
Felicity, if we stay with you for a moment, I'm just wondering, this outdoor play and that environment and maybe the weather and those kinds of things, what's the role of the educator in that then? And are there specific issues and responsibilities that come with outdoors that maybe wouldn't apply inside?
It depends very much on your educator's experience. And if you have educators who have not had experience of outdoors, they may well actually find it quite difficult. You have to nurture and support their growth and understanding and the benefits of outdoors. You have to start with where your educator and where your parent is at, because everybody will have different life experiences, which will fashion their ideas about what is good about being outdoors. Some people see outdoors as somewhere just to let off steam. That is their experience, and they think that that's all outdoors is good for. So as a leader, you have to be very knowledgeable, not just about your children, but about your parents' experience and your educators' experience, so that you can take them all with you.
Let's bring in Beverley, because you're a nursery manager at Tiddler's Wraparound in Caerphilly in Wales. I guess when Frobel had his principles, health and safety was nothing like it is now. Does it worry you at all that there's an additional risk with outdoor play, and have you to do things to try and manage that?
So, again, that's a really important thing for a child to learn. And, they'll go outside, they'll start climbing trees. They'll only go as far as they feel safe. They'll very rarely push it too far. There are adults around there. And of course, that's for them to learn next. So yeah, risk is an important part of it, but we've had trips and falls but nothing ever too serious. I mean, again, it's that freedom with guidance. There are educators there. We're not putting anything that's too risky in their way. But, we take, as Felicity just said, we take parents with us regularly into the forest. And, you see parents start to relax the more we go into that forest in all different seasons and weathers. They actually become more and more relaxed, knowing that they can actually trust their children and give them that autonomy to really test their own strength and challenge and risk and all the rest of it. So
and Holli, what do you do if there's a child that maybe doesn't want to go outside, maybe sometimes even refuses to go outside?
We really do start from where the children are and what it is the children need. So we'll be trying to tune into what is going on with that child, maybe at that particular time, that day. Is there something going on at home? Is this a conversation we need to have with parents about why they don't like to go outside? And we have had children who just don't want to go on trips. So they're okay to go in the garden, but they don't want to go beyond the nursery. They don't want to go out into the wider community. So we listen to those children, and we slowly introduce them. And you have to have that key person approach. So somebody who they trust, those relationships are really important to help them along that journey. But it is a journey and it is a process, and it is about listening to the children in the first instance.
Can I bring you in here, Janice? Because it's not just listening to the children. I guess you need the parents buying into this as well.
We find that we have to talk, spend a lot of time with our parents, explaining to them the importance of the outdoors and the importance of the children doing lots of physical activities. We find that a lot of our children are reaching school age and getting to school and then finding it really difficult to write. Their fine motor skills are not there. And their core muscles, they sort of slump because they haven't got that strength. So we need children to be building on those strengths and using their big gross motor skills outside. So everything we do outside is really big movements, whether it's big block play or it's hammering with nails and real woodwork, but as many things as we can to get the children using those big muscles. And I think the parents do come along with us on the journey. At the beginning, I think sometimes parents, especially if the weather's horrible, they're like, oh no, the weather's horrible. And we say there's no horrible weather. It's just a question of us seeing what else we can do outside.
And that's probably a really important connection maybe for parents to make. Sometimes they think, well, how does this playing outside going to help them when it comes to primary school or it comes to writing? But you would say actually using those muscles is critical.
Yeah, I just wanted to endorse really what Janice said, because I think parents, through no fault of their own, actually, because what we're led to believe is that you go to school and that's where you learn to read and write. But actually what parents don't realise is the massive amount of things that need to happen in the child's development before they can physically read and write. And outdoors is where a lot of those things happen. So the children, through big, heavy, awkward, moving things, are tightening all their core muscles and strengthening their upper body. And if a child doesn't have upper body strength, they won't be able to write. They just can't do it. So also the things that they're doing by twirling and swinging and rolling and really physical, that is developing their vestibular sense. And if your vestibular is not developed, then you can't balance, you can't walk well, you can't control, you don't have the control of your body that you need just to be able to be part of a larger community. So all those things I think are really important to talk to parents about. I'll tell you a little story of a parent I had who never wanted her little girl to go outside when it was raining, ever, because she thought she'd catch cold. Also, she thought she'd get dirty. And she had crinkly hair that when it got wet, she used to straighten her hair, and when it got wet, it went all crinkly. Well, she and I disobeyed the mum. Very, very naughty of me. But we were having such a lovely time outside, and it started to rain. And we did lots of learning, and we did snail races, and then it rained really hard, and we sheltered under the trees, and we learnt that all the insects were sheltering under the trees as well. And she was fascinated by seeing all the little flies under the big sycamore leaves. When her mum came to pick her up, she knew she'd been outside because her hair had gone all crinkly. She was furious, really, really cross. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but this is what we've learned. And I just went through all the way down this long 50-foot corridor. I was saying, she learned about snails. She learned how insects hide underneath the leaves. We did some climbing. She's done some running. She's done some twirling. She's developed her balance. And I just went on all the things I could think of that she was learning outside. And then there was half term. After half term, this mum came and found me and said, I just want to say I'm sorry. I've been thinking about what you said all half term. I had no idea she was learning anything outdoors. And I just think that was such a lesson for me, because it made me realise how much we have to make learning visible for parents outdoors, and we probably don't do it enough.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Felicity. That's absolutely fascinating. Brilliant. What a story. Beverley, I'm just wondering, from your own experience, can you think of maybe a situation or a day where you felt like the lights went on involving sort of outdoor play, either in a child or a member of your staff or maybe a parent, and you thought, wow, this is what it's about. This is why we're doing this?
I mean, in the whole start of this process of the outdoors, I was basing on my own childhood without ever realising I'd had a very Frobelian childhood. But, I didn't have the name or the cloak to wear with it. So when I took over in Tiddlers, it was the very first thing I wanted to do was to get outside and the children to be able to grow their own produce, so that we could cook with it. And that's been actually hugely important over the last year. We're all living in a cost of living crisis, and children are bringing their parents on this journey because, surprisingly, lots of parents have got no experience of gardening or growing their own produce. And so they've got involved with that. And we've also got St. Thomas's Trust, which is the food bank next door. We're starting to grow potatoes and some vegetables for them. Again, lots of these children visit the food banks themselves, so it's that really feeling a part of that community where they're giving back as well. And it was a bit of a stretch to get all the staff on board. That did take time because, we were all in different places with this. But now I think they'd be horrified if I said we were to stay in all day.
You said it took a bit of work to get them on board. So how did you do that?
I tried to get the staff as well to really notice their surroundings, to be engaged with nature and in nature, and just through their observations of the children and them actually seeing all these wonderful learning experiences that these children were having that you just wouldn't see indoors. The children who don't like to draw or pick up a pen, picking up sticks and making marks in the mud and making marks on bits of bark. And, so they started to really see the benefit of it. And also the children's well-being and happiness, it was hugely increased.
Now, Holli, you've got babies at your nursery schools. Mm-hmm. Presumably they spend time outdoors as well, and I'm just wondering how you and your staff would manage that. Are there any particular considerations for babies?
So We have all-in-one suits for our babies, so we make sure that they've got, especially for the colder months and the wetter weather, that they are covered and they're appropriately clothed. Because some of our babies aren't even moving yet, let alone crawling or walking. And it's for the educators to understand where the children are in their development and what it is that they need. And we've spoken a bit about starting from where the children are and starting from where the educators are. And yes, of course, there are considerations because their needs are different. They have shorter bursts outside, which go around their individual routines, but we do find that they are calm outside, they enjoy being outside, and it's a really important part of their day. We have pushchairs as well, so that although they can't walk around the local community, they can take everything in, the wind on their face and the rain in the air. We don't get snow very often in London, but when we do, we make sure that the children experience that. But of course, we have to accommodate based on all the different needs of the children, even some of the older children as well, and making sure that they've got the all-in-ones and everything, and that the parents understand why we go out.
And Janice, your place at Golders Green, I know it's quite limited space outdoors, and you're also supporting young children with additional needs and disabilities. Have you had to adapt that outdoor space much in order to accommodate people, and what kinds of play and learning outside are you doing?
So we did adapt. We made sure that there's ramps everywhere so that the children are able to access all the equipment. And the play and learning that they're doing outside is that we've got like lots of sensory plants. So we've got rosemary and lavender and lemon balm and mint and even lamb's ears, which are very soft. So we've got all these sensory plants around that when the children walk past them, they brush them, the smells come out again. So getting those sensors. We've lots of wooden wind chimes around the nursery as well. So again, so that they can hear things, so they're seeing and hearing using those sensors. We have some children in wheelchairs, and they just love being outside, having again the wind on their face and listening to the birds, or just lying down and looking at the different types of clouds and which is a rain cloud. Our children know, which one is going to be is going to give us the rain. What's that called? Which is the cumulus nimbus. So they know those names.
And Felicity, I'll just bring you back in just now, if that's okay. We've heard like different arrangements, different setups, different physical spaces. Is there an ideal, almost like a kind of minimum recommendations that you think a nursery ought to have in order to really do this properly?
What I would say is a decent amount of outdoor space, depending on the number of children you have. It doesn't really matter what that outdoor space is, because you can make it. Whatever you've got, you can do things with it. And wherever you are, I was in India, in Calcutta, working with the street children, and I was asked to make a garden on a building site in rubble. And I did that with the children. So wherever you are, nature will find its way. And it's just about enabling and supporting the children to be aware, to observe, to listen, to be part of nature.
I think Holli just wants to come in on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Felicity, 100%, listening to what you're saying really resonates with me. And I think I was talking to a colleague actually a couple of weeks ago, and we were discussing our own experiences of the outdoors and how that was very much centered around the school day. So you have very short bursts of time where you're allowed outside, and the rest of your time you have to be inside. So you're dictated when you're allowed to and when you're not allowed to, and none of that is really free. So as we grow up to become adults, we still have that within us a little bit, that, oh, we can't go outside when it's raining, oh, it's wet play. And actually really challenging ourselves and unlearning all of that as to what does that really mean? How is that beneficial for me? And what is the impact then going to be on these children? And it's really the experiences that we try and give the children at the nursery to make sure that, yes, okay, they are going to go on to school and they are going to have lots of different experiences, but how can we make the experiences with us really that foundation of understanding what it means to be in nature, so that they can then go on and hopefully foster that love of nature to then, become more sustainable as well, if we're thinking about climate change too. But equally, that barrier with the educators to say, okay, you need to take the time to really think about what nature means for you. I mean, I can tell working from home, if I haven't been outside all day, I can really tell and feel the impact that it has on my own well-being.
Janice, we were talking about, getting, I suppose, making staff advocates for the outdoors. And one of the things that maybe can help with that is training. And I know that you've been through, I think, was it the Frobel Trust short course about helping children connect with nature and outdoor play. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and how that helped?
So it helped my educators enormously because we discovered that some of our educators had never even climbed a tree. They had never experienced. So we want the children to have all these fabulous experiences, and yet the educators didn't understand it themselves because they'd never done it. So we took them to the park where they got to climb trees. And that helped them when they were working with the children to, first of all, not feel scared for the children about taking those risks and allowing the children and knowing that they themselves had done it. So they had that first-hand knowledge, which is really important.
Great. Beverley, I wonder if you could maybe just give me an example. How would you sort of summarize what do you think spending more time outdoors has done for the children? What kind of difference do you think it's made?
Oh, I mean, huge difference. One thing, it's interesting listening to Janice because, we have children who also have additional learning needs. And you go into that outdoor space and it's just, they all get to experience it from where they're at. That freedom, the child who wants to go and sit by themselves, but doesn't feel so conscious outside doing that. They can go and hide away in a little den or go and sit on their own. And whereas, when we're indoors, we do feel really self-conscious, I think. If you wanted to go and sit alone, it kind of looks a little bit more obvious. So I just think, the freedom children have and being able to explore and investigate, it's cognitively and spiritually, it makes a huge difference to them.
And are you all in agreement that, because you seem to be, that behaviour improves outdoors?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've talked a lot, Beverley, about the well-being of the children. What about the well-being of the staff? Do you find that they're happier, less stressed, fewer days off sick?
Absolutely. They're absolutely happier. And, same as with in Wales, we've got a new curriculum and it literally sits hand in hand with the Frobel approach. It's kind of got Frederick Frobel all the way through it, I think.
And there's something that Dr. Stella Louis says, which is that staff need to find themselves within their practice. As educators, we need to understand ourselves in order to be able to effectively teach, if you like, the children. So there's a lot of responsibility that we have in order to, we don't get it right all the time, but really recognizing that and reflecting on that and understanding where we are in order to support the children and support each other. It's really important to have professional discussions, exactly as Felicity said as well.
Holly, if there's somebody listening to this, maybe a setting leader or an educator, and they're feeling inspired, they like the sound of the Frobelian approach and outdoor play, what would be a good starting point for them to explore this further with a view to implementing it where they are? What should they do first?
Well, they can access the Frobel Trust website because there's lots of wonderful resources there, and think about the training and the team that they have and the environment that they have. The Frobelian principles as well are a really excellent place to start, and that's where we started. We started by looking at the principles, thinking about how it aligned with our practice already and how we could then build on that. It's really important to recognize where you are in order to then build and move forward. If you are using a completely different approach, it's more difficult to just completely switch, but there are elements that you can really build upon, and it is a slow cook. And as Felicity said, it's a lifelong journey. But once you're on it and once you understand, you're on it for life, because it really is, it's constant learning. And that's what's really exciting about it. But you have to know where you are in order to move forward.
Thanks, Holly. And I think Beverley just wants to come in here as well.
As soon as staff start with me, I signpost them to the Frobel Trust website and tell them to start downloading the pamphlets. looking at some of the stories on there, watching some of the webinars, because I mean, they were incredible for me and still are. So, I signpost them there so they can start to understand.
Thanks, Beverley. And listen, it's been such a fascinating discussion. Huge thanks to all of you. And how about a final word from Felicity? If there's someone that's still not convinced, spell it out to them. Why is outdoor play and nature so important?
Children become really resilient when they're outdoors. They brush off minor difficulties, seeing them as what they are. They're going to achieve what they wanted to set out to achieve. And I think that nature not only calms children down, but it also gives them the creative urge to think outside the box. And we absolutely need that now.
Well, those words from Frobel Trust travelling tutor Felicity Thomas bring us to the end of another episode of the Frobel Trust podcast. Thank you very much for listening to this episode on the value of outdoor play. You can find out more about all my guests by looking in the podcast description. And if you visit the Frobel Trust website, that's at frobel.org.uk, you can access a collection of resources for educators, inspiring case studies and research all about children and nature. That's at the frobel.org.uk website. They're all free to access and download. And in our next episode, we'll be exploring what a Frobelian approach to observing and assessing young children looks like in an early years setting. And my guests will include Dr. Stella Louie and Gaynor Brimble. So I hope you'll join me next time.